Howdy, this is the Views from the Shop podcast. I'm your host, your one and only host, Tim Miller, and today it is Tuesday, April 7th, 2026, and I wish you a very, very, very happy International Snail Papers Day. On today's show, we are live here on YouTube and on Twitter, kind of reacting to what has happened in day one of the transfer portal officially being open. Ohio State more than active at this point. A lot of different players that they have been linked to publicly. I'm going to kind of talk about that on this show and review everything that has happened there, while at the same time, I'm going to give my own context and color to what's going on. A bunch of players have been linked to Ohio State. Some other players have not been linked publicly to Ohio State, so I will try not to mention those players. But if you are interested in getting some insider content, that's something that I'm giving a bunch this time of year. Link is in the chat. Views from the Shop podcast.substack.com. You can go there for completely free. Sign up and get access to a bunch of free content, or you can join the chat. That's what that link is for, where I'm dropping a bunch of other nuggets. I'm going to drop some nuggets there once we get off this show. I've gotten some text messages back and forth and stuff like that. So we'll talk about that in the chat. Make sure you get there if you want coverage like that. I'm doing it year round. This is the only Ohio State basketball exclusive podcast that previews and recaps every game Ohio State plays throughout the season. Transfer portal, cover it from top to bottom. Summer guest series once we get into the offseason, where we have Coach Diebler, players, other staff members, those in the program on the show to tell a bunch of great stories and things like that. So highly recommend you subscribe. Last time I went live, got a bunch of likes. Please like the video right now if you're watching on YouTube. Even if you're not watching on YouTube at this point, please like the video. Get to YouTube, like the video, and subscribe. Look, I was hoping to get to 400 subscribers by, 300 subscribers by, or what are we at? Yeah, 300 subscribers by March Madness. We got there before March Madness, a little bit before. And now we are up to nearly 400 subscribers on YouTube. In just a matter of a week or so, 2 weeks, 100 new subscribers on YouTube. Get to YouTube. That's where you want to be. So today, we're talking the portal. I've got an article that I'm going to post here tonight on the Substack, viewsfromtheshop.substack.com, on what's happened today in the portal. I'm going to walk through some things, and I'm going to, give my own color and things like that. So that's the plan for today's show. Thanks so much for being here. Let's get into the first player that we want to talk about here for Ohio State. And that, I guess, is a player from George Mason, because that's where we start at this point. Let's get to him. Cory Mincy is the first player that we are going to touch on here as a player that Ohio State is interested in at this point. Cory Mincy is a guard out of George Mason. Ohio State is interested in him. This is a player that hasn't been floated around all that much, but I can confirm at this point Ohio State is interested in Mincy. He's from George Mason, played at South Carolina, Pitt, and Ole Miss as well. This is a player as well that, as you kind of look at his overall numbers, not really going to overwhelm you, but he did lead a pretty good George Mason team in scoring last year for the Patriots, 14.2 points per game at George Mason, while also adding 2.9 assists per game. And then from behind the arc, this is where Ohio State probably should really focus at this point, especially if they're able to land another player that I'll talk about here in a second. He was 38.2% from behind the arc this season. So that was a really, really good number for him. The thing with Mincy, though, he's 6'2", likely going to be an option off the bench for Ohio State coming into this upcoming season if they're able to get him. My biggest thing, I would say, at this point is, as you've got a player like John Mobley Jr., and as you're looking at who to pair with him in the backcourt, one of the biggest things for me is you got to have size. John Mobley Jr. is 6'1" on a good day. I mean, this is a player that most likely you could say is probably closer to a 5'10", for example, than a 6'1" or a 6'2". Again, I know he's going into the portal, going into the NBA draft at this point. I expect him back fully. You probably should as well. But if you get a player and you're going to pair him with John Mobley Jr., I think it's got to be someone with size. So I do think this is a player that comes off the bench for Ohio State. If they're able to get him, that would be my guess at this point. So that's the first player that we're going to talk about. I also want to, I guess we'll go back at this point as we look at Mincy here. Coming out of George Mason, there's going to be a lot of players that Ohio State is interested in. Just because they're interested doesn't mean they're going to get him. And if Ohio State loses a player, it doesn't mean that the world is on fire. At the same time, if Ohio State is after a player and you're upset that they're after that player, you should probably know that that player he's not going to have the role that maybe you expect, right? Like looking at Cory Mincy, for example, coming in from George Mason, not necessarily the worst player in the world to get, not necessarily the best player in the world to get. He's not likely going to be a guy who comes in and starts for Ohio State. You've got to fill out the bench. That's kind of a pretty big need at this point for Ohio State. When you lose guys like Colin White, when you lose guys like Gabe Cupps and Tayson Chapman, all those different types of things, Ohio State has got guys that they are going to have to pull off of the bench. They're going to have to replace some of those players. So Mincy is a player like that. Let's kind of flash back now to where Ohio State is in the portal. So Devin Royal is gone. He entered the portal with a do not contact designation today. All signs point to him going to UConn. Apparently, good for him. Wish him the best of luck. Gabe Cupps and Tayson Chapman announced their intention to enter the transfer portal on Sunday. Believe that they are in now at this point. Colin White as well announced his intention to enter the portal on Saturday. He is in the transfer portal officially as well. There's one player that there hasn't been an announcement on yet at this point. That is Matthew Grugitic. You're going to get something here by the end of the week on him. He's not going to stay at Ohio State. Okay, I've said it before. I'll say it again. Ohio State is not going to take Grugitic back at this point. He's going to be gone. So I don't know if he goes to the portal. I don't know if he goes back home. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But what I will say at this point is he's not coming back to Ohio State. So that's another player that the Buckeyes are going to have to replace. Now, as we look at where they're at right now, let me drag myself down here if you're watching on YouTube. Ohio State projected to retain Myles Harrow and Braylon Nash. They will retain John Mobley Jr. unless there's some kind of crazy draft development with him. They'll keep him. Anthony Thompson, a 5-star. Alex Smith, a 4-star, coming in as freshman. And then Amari Bynum will also stay. And then I also announced too, at this point, Josh Ojawuna and Ivan Nagovin, both expected to be back for Ohio State as well. So this is the core for the Buckeyes. We continue to talk about what do they need. I continue to talk about what I think they need. At this point, I think Ohio State needs a top-level guard to pair with John Mobley Jr. You need a center that you can potentially start over Josh Ojawuna, or at least not feel bad about your center depth with Ojawuna and Ivan Nagovin. And then you obviously need some backcourt help at this point. Would like some three-point shooting, would like some defensive players as well there in the backcourt that can come off the bench for you at Ohio State. So those are kind of the needs I would say Ohio State has at this point. And the first player, again, I mentioned is Cory Mincy out of George Mason. Who's the next player to mention at this point? Well, this is a bigger name, so we'll get into him now. By the way, drop in the comments, which player are you most excited to get so far that you've seen linked to Ohio State? What player do you want the most? Drop it in the live chat, and I can get to that here in a second as well. The next player we'll talk about, it is Jaylen Harrelson out of Notre Dame. There's a lot of smoke with this player heading into potentially Ohio State. Now, the first thing that you want to pay attention to is he's an Indiana kid, so staying close to home may be important to him. There's also relationships, I'll say, that are intact between Harrelson's side and Ohio State's side that allow this to be a really, really strong potential. I believe a Zoom call was completed today with Ohio State and Jaylen Harrelson. Harrelson is a player that on the year, he averaged 16 points per game for Notre Dame as a freshman. He was the top player to ever go to Notre Dame as a freshman as well. Top ranked player, top 20-ish player overall in his class. He started in 23 out of 27 games he played in for Notre Dame in the previous season, 16.2 points per game, 4 rebounds per game, 2.6 assists per game. Now, the knock on Harrelson is going to be his shooting. His three-point percentage this year was just 20%. He took less than 1 per game on average, but where he's really good is slashing. And I think one thing that you'll look at with Jaylen Harrelson in terms of a connection to Ohio State, you say, where's the fit? I don't get it. Is he not a 3? Would he not play with Anthony Thompson? Like, who's going to start at the 3? I think you potentially see Jaylen Harrelson start for Ohio State at a point forward type of role where you've got John Mobley Jr. starting, you've got Harrelson, you've got Anthony Thompson, and then you've got Amari Bynum at the 4, and whoever starts at the 5 between Josh Ojawuna and a transfer. But Harrelson is a player that's going to come in and have an opportunity to start for Ohio State. That's going to be the role for him if Ohio State gets him. This is one player where I am starting to get a little bit more confident as well that there's going to be a fit here between Harrelson and Ohio State. I do think there's a good chance that it works out. And again, I mentioned that point forward role. I mentioned the Evan Turner role. By the way, this is a player I mentioned yesterday in the Substack. I mentioned 7 players who Ohio State was likely going to be in on. On that list of 7, there's at least 2 that I'm going to talk about here today. Harrelson is one of them. That assist rate for Harrelson, the vision that he shows, turning the ball over, that was a bit of a struggle for him overall, but I do think that he can start in kind of a point forward role for Ohio State in this upcoming season. And then you look at the length Ohio State would have. 6'7", Jaylen Harrelson, Amari Bynum, and Anthony Thompson, both, I think, 6'7" or 6'8", and a 7'3" wingspan. Then you got Josh Ojawuna, almost a 7-footer as well. You're going to have a lot of length and a lot of size if you're Ohio State going into next year with Harrelson. So that's something that I think a lot of people can get really, really excited about. I understand the doubts with Harrelson. I understand the three-point shooting. That's not something that I can argue against at this point, but this is a top 40 player, I think 42nd according to 247 Sports. He's a guy that you should absolutely keep your eye on at this point if you are an Ohio State fan. Number 42 in 247 Sports rankings. And again, I would say at this point, Ohio State probably the leader for him at this point. So Harrelson is a player to keep an eye on if you're an Ohio State fan. I've got another player to keep an eye on as well. This, I think, is more of a player who probably comes off the bench for Ohio State, but drop it in the live chat. What do you think about Harrelson? What are your thoughts on him? Let's get to the next player now, and that is Devin Vanderpool. So Vanderpool, an FAU transfer, played at Florida Atlantic. He led the Owls in scoring at 15.8 points per game last year, 6.3 rebounds per game, and 2.4 assists per game as well for Vanderpool. Really, really strong player offensively. Played in 22 games before suffering a season-ending injury against USF on February 15th. Ohio State had a Zoom meeting with him today. It was Jacob Polacek from Kentucky Sports Radio, the first report that Ohio State was among other teams having a Zoom call with him today. Maryland, Georgetown, Mississippi State, Oklahoma State, and Providence all are teams in the mix for Vanderpool. This would be a depth addition for Ohio State. I don't think they're bringing him in to start in the backcourt. Stands at 6'4" for Ohio State if he came in as well. So I don't think he's coming in to start necessarily, but what I would say, he would be a really, really strong piece off the bench and maybe potentially starting as well. I think they see him as a player who could start, could not. It would be nice, though, if you had a player who you would say surefire starter with John Mobley Jr. and Vanderpool can come off the bench. I see a question, Indiana player for M2. I haven't seen that. I could be wrong. I'm not sure on that. Not an Indiana insider here. Many would say I'm not even an Ohio State insider. So even I would say that. I'm just reporting what I see, folks. That's all it is. All right. Next player to get in here for Ohio State for you to keep an eye on is a big from Louisville. It's Sandra Fru. Fru and Ohio State have been linked to one another. The Louisville big man, first reported by Travis Branham from 247 Sports, interested in Ohio State, and I did have a source confirm to me later today that those two, there is mutual interest there, so can confirm that on my end. In 35 games, 6'11 big man, averaged 9 points per game, 1.2 assists per game, and pulled in 6.1 rebounds per game. Absolutely. Oh, yeah, sorry, I see your comment now on Harrelson. Yeah, Indiana may be a player for him. Sounds like right now, not the biggest player. I still think that Ohio State is absolutely a leader for him. On Fru, how tall is he? I see a question in the chat. 6'11", so not a 7-footer, but he does have some good size, and he had some really, really good numbers as well. Popping a cough drop here as we talk. 14.9% offensive rebounding rate, really, really strong, and then his true shooting percentage was elite, 75.1% last year for Fru. That is 99th percentile in college basketball. Obviously, Ohio State, they've got a void here at center. You've got Josh Ojawuna and you've got Ivan Nagovin. Neither of those guys, I don't think, are necessarily players that you would say, oh yeah, they should absolutely start for us. So if you get a guy like Fru, kind of the issue here, I guess I would say with him, is you've got a concern about his floor stretching ability. I really want Ohio State to get a guy who can stretch the floor at the 5 because you've got two traditional bigs. I think you need a guy who can stretch the floor for Ohio State. So when you play teams that are big and when you play teams that want to bring that 5 out, you've got to be able to go out and guard as well. That's something Ohio State did have in Christoph Tilley last year. I know fans have their own thoughts on him, obviously, and how he played. One thing he could do well is he could come out on the perimeter, both offensively and defensively. So in terms of three-point shooting for Fru, average 0.2 three-point attempts per game last year, made 50% of his three-pointers attempted, but with such a low three-point attempt rate, it is what it is. But obviously there's a void there. Other teams expected to be in the mix, according to Travis Branham, Creighton, BYU, Indiana, among others. So that's another player that I would keep an eye on if I'm Ohio State at this point. The next player that I'll get to, it's Devin Brown. And no, it's not that Devin Brown. It's a different Devin Brown. Devin Brown from Davidson. This is another player that I mentioned in the article that I posted yesterday of kind of, I guess we'll say guessing, is as conservative as I can be. Guessing who Ohio State would be in on. Devin Brown is another player there who not only is Ohio State in on, but can confirm. I don't remember who had it first. I think 11 Warriors posted this actually, that Ohio State was going to have a Zoom, or not a Zoom call, sorry, an official visit scheduled for Friday. So just so you all know, when it comes to where we're at in the calendar right now we are in a dead period where you cannot have in-person contact with portal players. You can have Zoom calls, you can have phone calls, whatever. Until Friday, no in-person visits. So that's why you see a visit scheduled for Friday. What that tells me is that Devin Brown is a priority for Ohio State. Now pause, okay? He's a 6'6" wing. He's coming in from Davidson, and at Davidson in his freshman year, he wasn't anything necessarily spectacular. Played in 34 games, started in 27 of those games. He averaged 6.4 points per game, 3.4 rebounds per game, and 1.6 assists per game. Shot below 41% from the field. So is Devin Brown the most special player in the world? No, not necessarily. But like I said at the start of the show, it's something we got to understand at this point, is Ohio State has to fill multiple roles. Just because you see Ohio State in on a player, and I see this in the comments on Twitter, so I address it now. Just because you see Ohio State is in on a player doesn't mean they're bringing him in to start necessarily. Like, that's not how this works. They're bringing guys in for depth. Devin Brown would be a player who would come off the bench for Ohio State and maybe get minutes similar to Colin White last year. Not a regular minute getter, maybe even less than that, but he's a role player for Ohio State. Not a six-man, not a starter, nothing like that. He is from Columbus. Lewis Center is his hometown, so very, very much a local kid. And we know Jake Diebler, He loves his local kids. He loves his Ohio kids. You had 3 Ohio Mr. Basketballs on the team just last year. Jake Diebler loves his hometown kids. So that's a guy that I would also keep an eye on at this point if I'm an Ohio State fan. And then I've got, looks like one other for you here. I've got no pictures. I've got no video on this guy. Okay? Sorry. It is what it is. This is Alon Sumler. Alon Sumler comes in from Charleston Southern. Averaged 18.9 points per game last year at Charleston Southern. Also contributed 4.8 rebounds per game and 3.8 assists per game. That's a nice stat line for a guard. Stands at 6'4". He was a 2025-26 first team All Big South selection. Played in 27 games and shot at 40.7% from behind the arc. Now, there's a lot of teams that have reached out to him, including, this kind of shows you the caliber of player that it is, okay? Including teams that have reached out, not only Ohio State, Kansas, UConn, Iowa State, and Vanderbilt, where former associate head coach Joel Justice now is coaching on staff, among several others interested in Sumler. So that's another player to keep an eye on. He played in 2 power conference games this year. One was against Virginia Tech, where he scored 13 points, and then he scored 14 against South Carolina. So even in games against power opponents, yeah, he scored less than his average, which I guess you would kind of expect when you're playing at Charleston Southern and playing a Power 5 team, but he still contributed a little bit. So that's another player that I would keep an eye on at this time. There's one more. I don't know if this is necessarily public or not, but I'll bring it up anyway. Houston transfer Isaiah Harwell is a player to keep an eye on as well. I don't know how warm things are there necessarily. Ohio State is going after guards. They're going after solutions in the backcourt. So that's a player to keep an eye on as well. And then one other player, let me check to see if this is public anywhere. And if it is, then I will share. Again, I don't want to be like the newsbreaker or anything like that necessarily. So let me, I guess I'll just look them up. We're doing this live, folks. And there's going to be more that you get even tonight. I'm sure there's going to be more news that drops. So when that happens, I'm happy to post it out and all that stuff. But let's see. I'm just going to search him on Twitter. And if he's on Twitter by anyone, then and connected to Ohio State, then I will say it. I'm not seeing it. So I'm not going to post it. Sorry. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be I don't want to drop 50 names that Ohio State is interested in. I can tell you they're probably interested in 50, 75, 100 players. Just because I name one, I don't know what that does for you. I'm trying to only name players that either there's public smoke or I know internally that there's a little extra there as well. So that's where things stand with Ohio State in the portal right now. Again, drop in the live chat. Who are you most excited for Ohio State to get? And please like the video on YouTube. YouTube has been growing like crazy recently, like weeds. Some would say it is that time of year. So I highly recommend you like the video on YouTube and subscribe on YouTube as well. This is kind of what we're going to do here moving forward in this transfer portal window. I'm going to try to go live at the end of, it's probably not going to be each day, but the end of big days. Obviously today is a big day. When Ohio State gets a commit, you can expect me to either go live or have something for you the minute the news breaks. I think that you're going to see from Ohio State, you're going to see some commitments before the end of the week is my guess. I think that, again, because you've got a player like Devin Brown, who is being prioritized right now and being brought on campus the first day that they're allowed to be on campus, I think that shows you something. And I've said in the Insider subscriber chat for a while now, Jaylen Harrelson is a name to keep an eye on. I'm very interested to see where that goes. Again, I would say Ohio State is the leader there. So if you're asking for my predictions, I'm not ready for crystal balls or anything like that, but those are my two players that I'm definitely keeping an eye on for Ohio State at this point. All right, Like the video on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube. Make sure you don't miss anything here because there's going to be a lot that happens. There's going to be a lot that changes. So make sure you're locked into the YouTube. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Give a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. And make sure you get to the Substack. Views from the Shop podcast.substack.com. You get push notifications to your phone, emails, however you want them. Whenever an article is posted by me or a note is posted by me of any updates, I will share that there as well. All right. If anyone has any questions, you can drop them in the chat right now. I'm happy to get into them. Until then, I see. This is I love the comments. We got 2 people arguing about how good or bad Devin Brown is. Look, I'm not here necessarily to litigate that. If he does become a Buckeye, which I lean toward him becoming a Buckeye, if he does, we'll talk about him. We'll talk about it. But we have to understand the role that these guys are going to get. You can watch a player and you can just look at their stats and say they're at Davidson and say, well, he must not be very good. And if he's not very good, he's probably not going to be the 6th man for Ohio State. He'll probably be closer to the bench. So I get each side of that, but we got to understand, like, you can't. Let's take a look. 247 basketball transfer portal. I'm going to take a look at where old Buckeyes in the portal may go. Brock, I see you. I don't know. This is what I say to the insider subscribers too. I have no idea where these guys are going to go. Kind of once they're out of Ohio State, that's where any of my expertise stops. Like, it sounds like Devin Royal is going to go to UConn, for example. So it is what it is. Dylan asking how the budget is looking. They're going to spend more than they did last year. I can confirm that they're going to spend a kind of a healthy amount more than they did last year. So that's something to keep an eye on for Ohio State. I don't really want to say a specific number here, but they're going to spend a good amount of money. So that said, look, Ohio State would love to go get Badunga from Kansas, right? The number 1 player in the portal and a center. They'd love to go get Juke Harris and John Blackwell, and then maybe a Miles Byrd and a Isaiah Johnson. They'd love to go do that. No team is going to do that. That's just not how this works. So we have to understand that Ohio State's going to have to take some players that are what they are. So they may not be at the top of the rankings. They may not be the most impressive player, but that's how the transfer portal works at this point. So you got to replace the guys off the bench. You got to replace Gabe Cupps, Tayson Chapman, Matthew Grudzic. Who else am I missing? Chapman, Cupps, Grudzic, and whatever other player has left. So it is what it is there. All right. That's the plan moving forward. Expect something soon, I would say, at least for me. I'm not saying from Ohio State. At least for me. Get to the Substack. Get to all the platforms. All right. Enjoy the rest of your evening. I will probably talk to you tomorrow. There's a good chance of that. Until next time, I shut up before you shut me off. Thanks so much for being here today. Go Bucks.